If you want to run for president in 2019 and you haven't submitted your forms yet, bad news, you're too late. The deadline has passed. And unless you had $14 million, it probably wasn't for you anyway. I'll be talking campaign financing, presidential candidates, and party defections on Nigeria Decides. Hello and welcome to Nigeria Decides. I'm Mark Edo. Our guests this week are British politician Councillor Susan Fajana-Thomas, political commentator Itoya, preventive terrorism consultant Temitope Olodo. Now, joining us from Lagos is the youngest man to aspire to Nigeria's presidency, representing the Advanced Allied Party, Chike Ukaegbu. You're very welcome, Chike. Now, Nigeria's parliament has just passed a new law capping campaign spending for the next year's election. And the following limits have been set. That's presidential candidates can spend up to $14 million. That's still quite a sum. Gubernatorial candidates, $3 million. Senate candidates, $700,000. And House of Representative candidates, $280,000. Still, those are huge figures. I'll just turn to my panel now. You're very, very welcome. Do you have a spare $14 million, any of you? No, you don't? No. Still quite a handsome sum. I mean, money is very important. It makes the political world go round. It's not an easy thing to do politics in any country, particularly in Nigeria. Yes. But it does distort politics. It does. Is this limit the right thing to do? Susan.
To just pick it on that as a British politician, you were talking about $14 million. It is a lot of money. Here in the UK, a parliamentary candidate cap is just under 8,000. And as a local councillor, my cap on my campaign is about £640.
£640.
That's what it is.
That won't buy lunch in.
It's calculated at 6p per elector. So I don't know how they come about the 14 million, but it's still a lot of money. But having said that, I'm sure in Nigeria they will even still spend over that 14 million.
But that's the thing, isn't it? Yeah. You can set any limit, but then you have to stick to those limits.
Yes. Yeah. But the problem is, how are these political parties going to stick to these limits? And who will monitor and review what they spend after election? But our electoral system requires them to submit an audited account after 6 months of the election. But this never happened in Nigeria. So this is the problem.
And Temitope, we're talking, this is the House of Representatives.
Yes.
They tried this before and they sent it to Buhari and he said, I don't like what I see, go and fix it. So now they've got this thing that seems to be a consensus. The Senate, incidentally, also has its own limits as well. Sure. So they've got to merge these two because they're not the same. The Senate's limits are lower. They're $250 million as opposed to $500 million, that kind of thing. So they're different. They've got to make sense of all this, send it back, and then it becomes enshrined in law, I suppose. It seems like good news on the face of it, because when you have politics, it's such a money game in Nigeria. So the political candidates that are chosen from people who can afford, or at least have godfathers or benefactors that can afford to pay those huge sums. That eliminates a huge number of people out there. So having these kind of limits are good, but as you say, they're very difficult to enforce.
It is, and when we look at it from world benchmark, it's not an inclusive politics in Nigeria. I stood for election here in the UK, and I know how much I spent and how I was working from house to house and getting that confidence from people. So, and that's not what happens in Nigeria. We don't see people moving from house to house, arguing politics and things. It's about the amount of money that you could dish out at the end of the day.
Cash is king.
That's right, because this 14 million cap is not about when you are talking about the election campaign, you're talking about your literature production,
Yes.
you're talking about your manifesto production, you're talking about the travels around. But in Nigeria, the money are not for that. The money are about the distribution of what they spend, how many cars.
Yes.
Individual presidential campaign will have at least fleet of cars to travel around into all areas. Those are what these money are for.
Now, you mentioned nomination forms. APC made 12.6 billion naira, APC, the ruling party, from nomination forms. Very prohibitively expensive if you want to be president. Chike Ukaegbu, who's standing by in Lagos there. Chike, you want to be president. First of all, have you submitted your form? And how did you manage to actually come to get the money together to do that? And these limits, what do you see? Because being in the thick of it, do you see this as good news? Do you see this as false news? What's your take on it?
With regards to the cap, I think it's a step in the right direction, but $14 million is still about 5 billion naira, which is still very prohibitive and very exclusionary. It's not encouraging for young people. I mean, there's this joke: we're not too young to run, but we're too broke to run. So it's one of two things: either young people, come up with creative ways to circumvent, politics as usual, or go find the godfathers to do that for you. We've decided to go with the first route. So we're coming up with different creative ways. We're trying our best to get a message out as much as possible to as many young people as possible to understand the importance of this election and the fight for our lives. And it seems to be resonating with people, and we're hoping that by the time February comes along, message would have been, out there enough to convince people that now is the time for us to take the mantles of leadership to redirect the course of history for our nation.
When you talk to this ruling class, call them, as a young person who has the ambition, the audacity of hope, might I say, to be president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, what's the reaction you're getting from them?
I actually haven't engaged any one of them. I haven't sat down with any of them to say, hey, I need your support for this. For me, I believe that I tell people the godfather we have is the young chap on the streets who understands the importance of this election and can put his 500 naira to it. In fact, there was this young boy at those states whom we discovered who did not reach out to the campaign. He said he heard the message on social media, and he put together a coalition of people. He had about 25 people in his team. They printed banners, they printed T-shirts, hats, medical glasses, and everything. And according to him, have gone into between 15 and 20 villages campaigning for us. Those are the godfathers that we have. We had to reach out and say, hey, do you want to be the state coordinator in your state for the campaign? And those are the people we're talking to. Those are the people we're reaching out to, people who are passionate about change.
Let me move on to another subject that also came up, and this is mandatory electric card readers. They're going to be used for the first time to try and quell vote rigging, these mandatory electric card readers. I want to know if that's a good thing, because the reliability of them is a bit of an issue. And this, the House of Representatives said, one of the things we're going to do is, if a card reader doesn't work, and you can't get a new card reader in within 3 hours, then we reschedule that vote, because that was what was so chaotic 4 years ago. I mean, that should be a good thing, because these little things have a very, very big impact. I was wondering if I could go back to Lagos now and see what you feel about that, because on the day, we want to reduce, I mean, even in America, they've had hanging chads and all sorts of problems with the technology around voting. I just wanted to go back to you and see what your take on all that. Is that good?
I think technology is great. It helps to, as you know, it's one of my pillars. I believe technology helps us to amplify and scale out solutions. In a case like this, I think what's more important, even in addition to that, is ensuring that the people are educated about their rights, one, what they need to do if they do encounter that. Don't just walk away. ask questions. So part of what we're doing is educating people to understand what their rights are, what they need to do on the day of election, how to find their polling booths, and what to do if they feel like there's misappropriation, or if certain things are not going right. What do you have to do? What do you do? Who do you talk to? How do you document that? Because I think relying on technology alone, especially as a first time or as a new technology, the likelihood of the problems will definitely rise. But the question is, what happens beyond that, right? Who's held accountable? What do we do in place of machines that don't work? What do we do in place of NEPA or generators that don't work to power these machines?
That's it. Yes.
What is the backup plan? And making sure that people know what those backup plans are to ensure that their votes are counted.
Well said. Well, you better go out and get some more voters, because I know it's a busy time for you. We'll let you go. Chike Ukaegbu there, presidential candidate. Thank you for joining us back in Lagos. We'll take a quick break now. There's so much more to discuss on Nigeria Decides, so please join us in a few moments. Welcome back to Nigeria Decides. I'm Mark Edo. There's been more sectarian violence, this time in Kaduna, where over 50 people lost their lives. Shops and houses were burnt down, and the government has imposed a curfew. President Buhari appealed to community leaders and citizens to choose, quote, dialogue, patience and tolerance to prevent further escalation. 3 days after special forces were sent in to restore the peace, calm is cautiously returning to Kaduna City. Authorities say the curfew imposed in the city is being relaxed, and in some places residents have up to 4 hours to restock essential supplies. But for nearly 1 million residents in areas believed to still be volatile, a round-the-clock curfew remains in force. The measure was put in place following protests on Sunday, which degenerated into violence. At least 55 people died following the crisis, which started in Kasuwan Magani. Christian and Muslim groups were attacking each other with guns and machetes, and the violence was threatening to spread across the state. The violence has been condemned by President Buhari and by the United Nations Humanitarian Coordinator in Nigeria, Edward Calon, who has urged authorities to investigate the clashes. Very sad images that we see far too often in Nigeria. Now, the president said, quote, the disregard for the sanctity of human life is unacceptable. Why do you think, there's a question, what amounts to a quarrel over porters in this instance? So this is a quarrel in a market about who's going to carry goods that escalated into what we just saw there. Definitely. Why would that kind of quarrel descend into such blatant violence so quickly? Now, Temitope, this is your meat and potatoes. Yes, this is what you do. You're a security consultant and you advise governments, companies and countries on this very matter. Why such blatant violence? Why such a spark and then boom, we see what we see?
I think there's an underlining challenge in that environment. It's an environment where tolerance is completely zero, and where people are just ready to ignite. And you expect that in a marketplace. You've got police officers in that area, you've got community leaders, market leaders. So if such an incident occurred, people who are ahead of those porters could have easily, calm it down and address those issues. In fact, in most marketplaces in the north, because I lived in the north, they also have police stations embedded within it. So the question is, all those institutions have failed to the extent that it's split out of that controlled environment, crowded place, to a situation where over 50 people lost their life. And even the security agencies do not have the rapid response to address it. That shows you a multiple of failures across the security institutions to address safety and security. And that's the reason why I'm a bit concerned, because community tension monitoring does not exist in Nigeria at the moment.
And let's look at the politics of this. We
Yes.
are in an election campaign. We're in the middle of it now. By the 16th of February,
Yes.
we'll decide who's going to be the next president. The current president ran on a security mandate, was
Yes,
one of his issues. This is all part of that. Not
Yes.
just the northeastern Boko Haram,
Yeah.
but places like Plateau, like Benue, Kaduna,
Yes.
and quelling this sectarian violence that
Yes.
is happening. How much does what we just saw there play into the factors of the voters, Nigeria deciding on who's going to be running this country going post-2019? Susan?
I think it really plays into it, and if you have been following what is happening in Kaduna, people are actually saying this latest unrest in Kaduna was actually motivated by politics.
Politically motivated.
It were politically motivated, and it were, I'm not accusing anyone, but it has been generally said that it was sponsored by some of the
Someone is
political leaders
benefiting from
in there.
these deaths.
And there's been a lot of some people are accusing the current governor, because in that area in the south of Kaduna, he's lost his supporters there, and there is the possibility of the people who will be voting for him come 16th of February to be voting for another candidate.
But we should say that those accusations are unsubstantiated.
Unsubstantiated accusations. There is the tension, the religion tension to what is happening in Kaduna between the Christians and the Muslims. This is all about Muslim and Christians.
Emmy, Susan says it's all about Muslims and Christians. They've been living side by side in Nigeria for generations. I remember being when my father was in Kano and visiting him in Sabogiri, we lived in, and I remember just going to Muslim and Christian houses. There was such harmony. This is back in the 70s and 80s. How could we have been living side by side for so many decades, and then you see this level of violence?
It's the failure of the political class and also the religious group. The religious group, they've not been able to educate our youths the divisiveness of religion if you apply it in a negative way. So that is why you see an issue that just occurred in the market becoming a national issue. So there's a total failure in the system. That's what we're saying.
Yeah, and it's serious because we're moving into an election time. We have less than 100 days. The president in 2015 ran on his credential. That he was an ex-general. He understands the terrain,
tough guy.
Security, and he understands that. Yeah. But when you look at the world index, when you look at the terrorism index, global terrorism index, Nigeria is hovering between 1 and 3. When you look at the cost of violence, over 10 billion cost of violence. When you look at the peace indicator, these are things that a president and a ruling party should be looking at. But every aspect of Nigeria, every region in Nigeria has one crisis or the other. And as we speak, there is no comprehensive security strategy in Nigeria. Nobody could show me one to address those issues and reduce violence, crime in Nigeria. It doesn't exist.
Now, there was a similar crisis in February, wasn't there, which left about 10 people dead, and hundreds of homes and businesses were burnt, right? How do you resolve a situation like this? Does the government or the governor need to intervene further? There's already a curfew. I mean, what more can one put in place to resolve this issue?
Nigeria is quick, and if I could just put it in quickly, Nigeria is quick to follow the normal routine of saying curfew, cheap publicity, pictures being taken. But you need to go beyond that.
Deeper.
You need to have a people-driven strategy to address this issue where local people are involved in decision processes to reduce violence, and then ensuring that all those drivers of violence are addressed and tackled. Why would two individuals who are Muslims, because they're potters, in that environment, have a fight and overnight a lot of people are losing their life. What are the drivers? Why is it happening? And then deal with it. Since 2000, when the first initial Syria law crisis in Kaduna left about 2,000 people dead, up to now, nobody have actually faced a serious sentence or in prison.
That's right.
For
Nobody,
that.
there's never anybody, you never see anybody arrested.
Yes.
That's the most amazing thing, Susan.
In terms of intervention, I'm not too sure if you're aware, in 2015 there was in Kaduna, they had this forum to actually reconciliate and find out more about what they can do about unrest. It went on for months, and 3 major things came out from that conference. It was about dealing with religious intolerance, it was about dealing with youth unemployment, and it was about dealing with political political tensions in the state in general. But till date, I haven't seen, we're talking about strategy, we're talking about finding solution. I haven't seen a giant stride from the political leaders in that state to actually do something about those strategies that were taught to move things forward in Kaduna.
Now, I said not many people get arrested, but what was interesting about this is 25 people were immediately arrested. I don't know if they were the right people, but 25 people were arrested, and Nasir El-Rufai said, we're going to fast track these people through the courts. I mean, he's trying to say, listen, this is not business as usual. We're trying to get a cap on this. You're shaking your head, Tim.
Yes, because arresting individuals, the first thing is that you must have a mainstream and actor's error. Sorry for
guilty mind, guilty act. Yes.
Arresting individuals does not mean that they've committed any offense.
It's almost like round up the usual suspects. Almost.
The same thing happened during the Zaria incident where a lot of people were killed. The bottom line is that do you have enough evidence to put these people through the court? And hopefully, God forbid, those individuals are not innocent victims that will get, that will be a scapegoat. We're not accusing anybody of that, but the issue is we need to start doing the right thing. We need to start ensuring that the right individuals are picked up, they go through the courts, and they're convicted. And when they're convicted, everybody knows that these individuals have been punished because of what they've done.
To have a prevention strategy.
Yes.
Emmy, we're in a political situation here. Is this going to get worse?
It will. Absolutely, because the root cause of this problem has not been identified, and nobody is putting any plan in place to eliminate it completely.
Sobering words. Now, we've got a lot more, so we'll take a quick break now. So much more to discuss. Please join us in a few moments. Do you want to join the conversation? Well, you can follow us on Twitter at RealJHUK. Hello and welcome back to Nigeria Decides. I'm pleased to welcome back our panel. Now, the next story is one that always makes me smile to a degree because this guy is never boring, I'll say that. Nnamdi Kanu I'm talking about. He's resurfaced at the weekend in Israel, of all places. Take a look at this picture. This is Nnamdi Kanu, all these pictures. Look at him at the Wailing Wall, wearing his Jewish, because he says that he's Jewish. Yes, he's a Jewish Igbo man, Easterner. And there he is at the Wailing Wall, giving thanks at the Wailing Wall in Israel. Yes, this is all 6 months after his family claimed he'd been killed. Now, Kanu quickly got back on the medium that he likes the best, the radio, to condemn what he calls the troops of the zoo. He calls Nigeria the zoo. For killing listen to this, his cousins, 28 others, and even his family dog called Jack. Yes, that appears though to have backfired very quickly because his words were very grabbed upon by the current IPOB leaders who are in Nigeria. They've disowned Kanu and they've sacked him because they say he cares more about his dog than his followers. Yes. That's what he says. So what are your thoughts? Susan?
It is, I've lived in London for 28 years. Nnamdi is somebody that I know.
Yeah, because he was here for a long time. He was
here. He worked closely with one of my best friends.
He's a British citizen as well, isn't he?
That's right. When they started the political party that represented the Igbo people here, he's always a militant individual. So I wasn't surprised the way, but the only concern I've I have is not getting the people, his followers, out of trouble and putting them in trouble, getting them killed is what I'm very worried about.
And it seems as if he's on his own to a great degree. Before we talk about that, let's just talk about the fact that someone you think is dead. Now, his family, he disappeared almost a year ago. I have to say, I thought the guy was dead. And then all of a sudden, his family members even thought so. He pops up in Israel, of all places, and then someone's recording him. He makes this, and it's almost like I'm back now, and I'm going to reclaim my throne. Only for people back in Nigeria to say, listen, you were in jail, right? So what they're saying is, when troops attacked his compound, and they did attack his compound, we saw the images of that, they will say people were killed, yes? And he was then taken by troops. He didn't escape. He was taken by troops. And then mysteriously, he's released. Only he, and I know maybe a few others, but he is released and others are held behind. What went on there?
I think I've got concerns because for me personally as a security consultant, I spoke about him so many times on air and I had to go on Twitter to apologize that I thought he was dead for 402 days until he resurfaced.
And you're an expert in this.
Yeah, I'm an expert because you see the way he went about it is completely wrong because if, for example, you escaped an onslaught as you alleged, you come out and you say, oh, I've escaped, you know, these people tried to kill me, my people, I'm here for you. But he didn't do any of that. He kept quiet, he went underground.
Yeah, the UK government was asking where he was. International organizations were asking where he was. No one knew where he was.
Because he holds a British passport. And as a result, the Crown still holds a bit of responsibility for him, regardless of what the situation is. But again, this more or less plays into the narrative that we're seeing on this matter. And that's the reason why I think the people, you know, that are following him are realizing that this guy is more of a fraud than anything else because he's not, there's no plan for the Biafra, there is no strategy for what he's doing. He talks with the Martin Luther King's kind of voice.
And what he says with that voice, I'm going to bring hell on Nigeria. That's what he actually said.
Where is the hell coming from? If you're a genuine leader and you are campaigning to have a referendum, to have your people break away from Nigeria, then you do it politically, you put in your grievances into the
but he's saying by any means necessary.
But you're saying by any means necessary, and because you're a British citizen, whenever anything go wrong, you jump on the plane, you leave the country.
Emmy, he upset a lot of his supporters after he named his dad. The only thing that he named, or the only living thing he named, was Jack the dog. Where he says 28 other human supporters were not mentioned, including some of his cousins that he alleges were killed.
Absolutely. You see, I personally don't have problem with anybody trying to agitate for referendum or
it's their right.
Yeah, it's their right. You can do that. But the way Kanu is going about the whole program is what I don't really understand. Now, there's a new group. They call them Southeast Renewal Group.
The Southeast Renewal Group.
Yeah. That the leader of that group said Kanu should not come back to the East. You know, you see, what I would have personally suggested if he's actually a leader, or leadership is for service. If you're a leader, you should be able to come together with your people, lay down your grievances, let's have a discussion with the authority, and find a way moving forward. But he has not done this, but he's promising help from afar.
Is this guy losing the plot? I mean, I'll go back to he appears now in Israel. He even suggests, I don't know if this is true, we don't know if this is true, that Mossad, that's the Israeli Secret Service agency, is supporting him and giving him help. I mean, the story goes from the sublime to the bizarre.
I think one of his greatest downfall will be that he talks too much and he doesn't have a strategy because implicating and getting people involved, getting the Mossad involved, will only get him arrested because it's not like you have immunity, it's not like you're a country of your own. You're carrying a British passport, you're implicating security agencies of another country where you are, they could easily pick you up, and I know the Israelis do not take those kind of things for life. So I would tell him to tread very carefully on the way he talks. And I think, the kind of pictures we've seen of him with security agencies and security people dressed in uniforms and saying that we have weapons that could annihilate Nigeria and turn Nigeria into a grass, those are things that you do not say. If you want to win a political match, you go in with a political strategy.
Yes, something that makes sense.
Something that makes sense. And you try to win as many people as possible. We've seen the referendum issue in Scotland. And even English people supported the Scottish at one point. Some people supported because they know it's their right political right.
And then there's Catalan,
Barcelona.
Barcelona.
But I was in an event in a school here in the UK where we were talking about, the Biafra issue. Almost all of us were saying, yes, these people have the right to ask for what they want to ask for. And when one of these members, Biafra guys, stood up, he said, look at all these children of zoos.
And just started very verbally attacking.
And instantly, what happened was a lot of Igbo people in the congregation, in the audience, stood up to denounce the Biafra issue, because that is what you do. You lose a lot of supporters, and I think that is what is happening to you. I think I'm sorry for his supporters and for people that actually got bail for him, the politicians, because they are the ones that will have to foot up the bill and might go to prison if he continue to escape the arms of the law.
So it looks like he's reappeared in Israel. It looks like he was there all along, or maybe sort of moved around.
Probably.
He's been moving around.
British passport allow you to enter.
It's apparently the easiest passport to travel the world with. I mean,
I thought he was in prison, to be honest.
But
I didn't know that he actually escaped. I thought he was in prison.
But I bring this back. He wants to lead a boycott against the election. That's what he says. No election. He wants to cause chaos. He doesn't want the election of the zoo, as he would call it, to take place. But the Biafra question is part of the mix when it comes to choosing the next government or so. How much, though, is what is happening over there, the agitation for a separate state, those people that resist that agitation, have come to play in the election in 2019 in February?
It has a lot to do, and I have to be honest with you. As a student of politics for over 22 years, I know it will have an impact. In 2015, it wasn't that serious because it was just brewing up. But Buhari has a solid 12 million votes, generally, at least for some time now. But those votes have been cut into because the Biafra issue we have are concerned. The Shiite issue in the north, we have a bit of a issue. Is going to have a lot of challenges in middle belt because of the Fulani herdsmen. So even if you remove about 3-4 million votes from there, that will have an impact. Taking into consideration some of our brilliant young aspirants that are coming up that will still into the youth vote.
Some of them, like we saw Chike there from the east.
So the ruling party should really be bothered about this different security challenges and find a way to political way to address some of the challenges that this.
But they're not. You don't hear much about it.
No, because one of the things that actually got me really irritated was the fact that when there was a discussion about the Southeast Development plan, it was killed in the Senate, and yet such discussions about the Northeast was allowed to move forward until some people raised some concerns. So we need to find a way in which we could get consensus in Nigeria, and our political leaders are not helping.
So maybe one of the silver linings from all this, seeing him at the Wailing Wall, is that it may raise up the voice or bring this back into the conversation.
Yes, definitely.
We'll take a quick break now. So much more to discuss. So please join us in a few moments on Nigeria Decides. Welcome back to Nigeria Decides Now. Shehu Sani, the senator representing Central Senatorial District in Kaduna, has joined the People's Redemption Party, that's the PRP, 3 days after he left the All Progressives Congress, the APC. Now, a very interesting guy, Shehu Sani. And am I allowed to say that I'm a bit of a fan of Shehu Sani every now and again? Because he's usually the guy that you see that stands up in Senate. You know, he's very, you know who he is. He has his like afro look, and he looks like a retired professor. And often is kind of the guy that will talk about stuff that others aren't. You see him on marches together. There you go. You see him on marches with asking for disability rights. Just the other day, 2 weeks ago, when there was talk of selling government assets a la the oligarchs back in Russia, you know what Yeltsin did, to pay off government reoccurring expenses. He was like, no, somebody, we should stand up and say something about this. He comes from, if you know his history, he was always something of an agitator. In university, he was an agitator. He got arrested by several governments. What do you make of it so close to the election?
I forgive him for that. The reason being, the political structure in Nigeria is not that matured enough.
So you're saying the ideology is weak. It's more about platform.
It's weak. It's about the individual. And in this situation, if we look at what has happened, he had every opportunity of switching and going to another party, either joining the PDP when that serious issue happened in the Senate. It didn't move. You know, that shows a man that is consistent. At least there's something we know about him. He's a man that stands up to talk about the things that he believes in.
Yeah, and he will do it regardless of the
how he does it. And we should know that considering the kind of challenges that he's had with his state governor and the fact that he even blocked some of the funding, and the state governor is known to continually insult him, and even
so they're at loggerheads often, the two of them.
There is no way he will have
on
been
easy bedfellows.
No, there's no way.
To a certain degree, I will agree with you. He's one of the Nigerian politicians that at least I have a bit of respect for, in the sense that our politics is not all based on platform and individualism. A degree of ideology comes into his politics. He wants to, he believes in inclusiveness in politics, and he has always stood for that. So, and I'm glad this time around that he's not defecting to go to the PDP.
At least.
He's gone to at least that. So he shows us that it's not about platform for him. It's not about I'm desperate to go back to the Senate.
He's saying I'm frustrated.
That's right. Saying I'm frustrated. I don't want to be part of this establishment called the ruling party. I want something else. And the something else he's gone to is not the mirror image of the ruling party by going in to the PDP. He's gone to.
You remember his words. He said, I would rather live in a cottage of honor than a mansion of shame.
That's right.
Yeah, okay. You see, I understand where you guys are coming from, but most credible politicians, what I would have expected from him was to step aside a little bit and out of the public face for a while, you know, out of politics for a while.
Rather than just jumping to another party.
Rather jumping to another platform. You move from one platform to the next platform.
Why?
So what that means is it's all about, he couldn't get what he wants from APC, so he's going to another platform.
But here in the UK, people cross the floor. They go from the Labour Party to the Conservatives. Not a lot, but it does happen. UKIP saw a lot of that as well, from the Conservatives to the UKIP party.
Yeah, it's important to understand that in politics, you have to remain relevant. You can't remain relevant if you take a back seat.
Now, let's talk about this party that he's joined. Now, what do we know about this party that he's joined? And why is he not, as you say, joining one of the heavyweights, the PDP? He's joining a third party. Does that mean that, or is this an indication that the third party wave that we're starting to see is so relevant that you're seeing a heavyweight like himself step into that fray? And I also want to talk about the PRP and the history of the PRP, because I think that's also significant.
I think I'll talk about the deja vu that is happening. We've seen it in Osun State, where Omishore moved to SDP, you know, just before the election, and he became the kingmaker. That's my political prophecy, that even if Shehu Sani does not win this election, he might actually be the kingmaker for the person that will become the senator or the person that will become the governor in Kaduna State. based on the fact that his vote that is taken away will actually impact on APC.
And if you look at the history of this party, the PRP, the People's Redemption Party, it has quite a colourful history. This was a party that was formed in the north. Nnamdi Kanu came into this party, and the onus of the party was that they had looked at the disconnect between the the Caliph, the Sokoto Sultanate, and the common man, and said, listen, this has to change. There has to be more power to the people, so to speak. So this PRP was created as a power to the people party, which also drew Marxists and other people that came in. And then they tried to resuscitate this party again. I think in the late 70s or 80s. Didn't work. They couldn't get any traction. And now he's come into this party. I guess he's dusting off an old party and saying, I think something old is something new again.
And I believe with what he's done, he can actually start a movement in Nigeria if he's able to sustain, or if he's able to or get more people, more politicians from both the big two parties. I believe this can be the party to watch out for in Nigeria.
And the space that most of these parties want to go into is not the sort of the older people, but really younger people. The next wave. We have a huge population. We have a massive population in Nigeria. So it's positioning for that next wave of voters. Now, speaking of population, Nigeria's newly appointed finance minister, Zainab Ahmed, said something that caught people's attention in a summit. This is the Nigerian Economic Summit in Abuja, that just concluded. She said the government had been speaking to traditional rulers and religious organizations about how to tackle population growth in Nigeria. Now, the UN estimates that the population of Nigeria will double by the middle of this century, and that 1 in every 10 persons in the world, babies in the world, will be in Niger. That puts a massive strain on an economy that is already under pressure. Education, healthcare, jobs, you name it. Now, you know what? Politicians always know. Stay away from the population issue because it's a sense of pride. You are talking to me about my children. Who are you? You know, to tell me how many children I should have. So she waded in. I think they've backtracked to some degree to say, no, it's just advice. We're just advising. We're not going to put a cap, because the biggest fear, I guess, is that they're going to now say, they're now going to say, this is how many people. We're going to have this China-like one child per family, or X number per family. So it's a little bit of a space that most people, savvy politicians, say, I won't go there.
As an individual, I believe in birth control. I believe in the fact that we need to do something about our population, but I don't believe in capping how many children you can have.
Because they said what we should be doing, the advice is we should put space between the children, so you have enough money to support the child that you have before you have another one.
You can do that in many ways. Spacing might be one of them, but I don't know how they're trying to I don't know how they're trying to implement that in Nigeria. But come to
maybe you have to go away for a few years and come back to the family house.
It's in tackling the population in Nigeria. Right now, 15 to 20% of graduates in Nigeria are unemployed. The government needs to start focusing on that, focusing on with the population as at now. And I think it is important, whichever party emerge as the winner next year, a census is important in Nigeria to be able to plan or resources accordingly.
You see, I happened to live in China for a while, and I saw the number of people that live in that country. Most countries that have population issue, they try to take advantage of it.
They harness it.
Yeah, they harness it. So there's a lot of potential in it. So you look at the market, you look at the economic development, you look at things that the government is putting in place to ensure that these people, they are able to harness the benefit of the population. But unfortunately in Nigeria, we are looking at it as a problem. You can't tell a Nigerian man how many children they can have. No, that will not work. So I personally believe that let them have the number of children they want to have. Let the government start putting priorities on how to boost our economy and how to get these people working again. Had to get Nigeria working again.
Anyway, I'll leave you with that sobering thought. 1 in 10 babies in the future is going to be in Niger. So get used to us. We're here, and there'll be more of us very soon. That's all the time we have for in this edition of Nigeria Decides. But I just have time to thank my guests, Susan Fajana-Thomas, Emi Itoya, Temitope, Olodo, and Chike Ukaegbu, who joined us from Lagos. I'm Mark Edo, and from the entire team here in London, goodbye and thank you for watching Nigeria Decides.